Hi everyone, it's Monday, September 29th, and here's another edition of the blog report. This one rather somber because the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008, what you know as the Bailout Bill, failed in Congress. It failed by a count of 228 no's to 205 yes. Reports are that 12 Republican members killed the Bailout Bill. Now, before we get too far down that path, just to stay on course for this program, let's see what the hot blog tags are right now as we look at Technorati. Here's Technorati Blogger Central, and today the hot tags are politics, news, business, Barack Obama, economy, John McCain, Sarah Palin, media, Obama, and archive. I have to ask you for you to excuse my voice just for a bit because I just got back from New York where I was on CNN during the weekend. So if you're a constant viewer of my channel, you've seen my presentation and you probably guessed that I'm, well, a little worn out, but the show must go on, as they say. Now back to the problem. Today, the House of Representatives had the opportunity to pass a $700 billion 110-page document that would provide relief to those giant organizations, giant in financial value, not necessarily in employment number, that have purchased the securities that have backed mortgages. Many of the mortgages that they own are either close to default or in some level of threat of default because simply people have not been able to pay on their mortgages as they have been in the past in a timely manner, such that the amount that they were paying that was enough to pay the bond and yet have some investment room for those who had decided to invest in them. The bottom line is that because of this gigantic failure to pass this legislation, the market, the New York Stock Exchange, reacted, and it reacted negatively. The Dow Jones dropped 770 points, and excuse me for a second, I was just checking the set. I'm not sure that's the final number. It was the newest number as of approximately 40 minutes ago, but before that it was at 710 and then 700 and then 600 before that. It's been a gigantic free fall. The only event I can remember that's comparable was the stock market crash of '87. But the structure of the markets, because of the savings and loan crisis, was much different. Why? Because there was less consolidation. Now, what does that mean, consolidation? It means that you didn't have a lot of these big financial institutions buying up all the small ones. We had a lot of small ones, and it was confined to the savings and loans. This is different. These are the investment organizations that buy the loans that are the mortgages that if you own a home or if you have a car, for example, which is another type of mortgage, your value is associated with, your ability to pay is attached to that mortgage. It's spread out over the period of time of that loan document. It doesn't mean that your loan is threatened. No, it means that the ability to get future lines of credit is threatened. Does that affect jobs? Yes, it affects jobs. It affects if you're starting a business and you need a line of credit, say $40,000 to $50,000 to start your business and hire people, it's going to be that much harder to get it. What does that mean? It means that you either will be turned away because the credit restrictions will be so tight that your credit will have to be so high that more than likely you won't meet that threshold, or you will be charged an interest rate amount so high it's considered to be usury. Usury means unjust, unfair, and immoral in its height. That's the situation we're in now. Could it cost you your job? It depends on the type of industry you're in. If you're in an industry, a startup industry, and you're relying on lines of credit to get you through the day, you may not be able to get that next line of credit. And the question is, well, how soon may that happen, or will that happen? It could be tomorrow, depending on your situation. It could be next week or a month. But the bottom line is that it's going to happen unless the government turns this vote around. And see, that's the problem. I alluded to it with respect to the national defense aspect of our economy when I was on CNN. But I'm going to go a step further with my comments. The Congress, and really, to be honest with you, many of you out there do not understand how complex your own economy is. We have had a major crisis of communications in this country. Our ability to understand complex problems and issues has been diminished because we haven't had enough, for example, investigative reporting and journalism to have the information in front of us to understand the problem, because in the journalist sector, particularly with respect to communications on a large level, networks like CBS, for example, with Van Gorder and Salter in the early 80s, basically yanked their budgets to pay for investigative reporting. What you got was news as entertainment, but it wasn't news as education as it used to be. Am I saying that in a long-winded way that we're basically been made dumber? Yes. That's one example. Another example is our education system itself. We don't demand the best from our students, and we teach them more abstract thinking rather than common sense thinking. We don't ask them to read documents. And then we have been so permissive in what we think a good education should be that we've let a whole generation of people go by the wayside who don't understand complex systems and how to do research to understand those systems. The economy is a complex system. It's not the economy of the 40s when the United States was the monopoly and could spend money anywhere it wanted to. We are in a world economy. And what happens here not only affects other places around the world, but what other places around the world do affects us. As I said on the weekend, we've allowed market economies to grow around us that have jobs that used to be here. That contributes to the current situation we face today. It's harder for people to get jobs, and when they do get jobs, the money that they're making isn't enough to really maintain the American standard of living that we not only come to expect and are used to, but our marketing system tells us we have to have with the cars, the jewelry, and everything else. We really are at a crisis point in the history of this country, and ideology, which I now define as idiot illogical. In other words, if you're ideological, you're illogical, and if you are ideologically driven, you're an idiot, has gotten us into trouble. For example, CNN had Glenn Beck on to tell us that he doesn't believe that government should be involved in the market. Well, here's the problem. One reason the bailout bill has failed is because of people like Congressman Ron Paul saying, well, the bailout bill is bad for the dollar. Look, forget it. The bailout bill, had it passed, would have resulted in at least a decent market reaction, not the crash we're facing right now. Ron Paul doesn't get it, and unfortunately there are people following him who thinks he gets it, but Ron Paul does not get it. You can't be a free marketeer in the world anymore. Why? Because all of the other countries around us, the newly industrialized country of China, the former newly industrialized countries of of Taiwan and Korea, the once newly industrialized country of Japan, the European community, all get that government must be involved in their lives. That's not a question for them. It's not an ideological issue. Had this been a problem in any of those countries, they simply would have, well, first of all, I argue they would not have been in this position because they would have done what they're doing, subsidizing and protecting their industries against the negatives of international competition, even while they're in international competition. We don't do that. We sing the praises of the free market. We say that government shouldn't be involved in our lives when it is. And then we're really surprised when something goes wrong. And because of our ideology, we haven't made government work. So government doesn't work. And then over that period of time, we've allowed the growth of these ideological idiots that say government shouldn't be involved in our lives. It's not a matter of should or should not. It's a matter of intellectual policy. It's determining on a case-by-case basis when government should take an action and what kind of action the government should take. It's not a blanket idea. The bottom line is it doesn't matter if it's the FCC in television, where by January 9th you have to have a digital set or you're not going to be able to see television, or the federal government bailing out the automobile industry for $25 billion, which just occurred last week, or the finance industry or the highway industry, you name it, government is involved in some kind of way. So if you hear or talk to someone that says government shouldn't be involved in our lives, I want you to just simply laugh at them, guffaw at them. No, don't hit them, even though you may want to. Don't do that. Just laugh at them and then politely walk away, because they don't know what they're talking about at all. People like that, at this juncture, should be ignored. All right, I'm done with that. The other problem here is a political one, and it's enormous. It is an enormous political one. The Republicans that did not support this bill are some of the same people that would tell you that the market should work. The market hasn't worked. But the even bigger problem is that they don't understand that they have to let go and simply make a statesperson-like vote. So what we have is gridlock, even as our economy deteriorates. What's the term? They fiddle as Rome burns. That's where we are right now. Hopefully there's a revote on this. Hopefully that the ideologues realize that they have to let go of being ideological for a moment and be intellectual and say, we're going to take the necessary actions to solve this problem, regardless of where that leads us. Who's the biggest political loser in all of this? Well, obviously it's John McCain. Why? Because last Thursday he said, I'm suspending my campaign, stood up David Letterman, went into a meeting with the members of the Democratic and Republican House to make it look like he was really involved and was going to deliver the votes to pass a bailout bill that made sense, and didn't deliver the Republicans. Then he says that Senator Obama stood on the sidelines and said that he was going to wait, and that Senator Obama said he was monitoring the situation. Senator Obama made the right choice. He tried not to interject presidential politics into the process. But Senator Obama was also right for another very, will be honest with you, political decision with respect to himself. He knew that there was a chance that bill may not pass. And he very rightly stood back, let John McCain step forward, because at the end of the day, it was John McCain's bill to win or lose. But Senator Obama knew that the Republican ideology was such that the bailout bill may not pass. And he wasn't going to stand there alongside John McCain and get himself into that situation. Senator Obama supported the bailout bill from start to finish. He understood that and understands that it's not the perfect solution to the economic problem, but it will, had it passed, it would have avoided the situation that we find ourselves in right now. Right this minute. So, what should you do? I I'm not an owner of stock right now. I sold. And I'm very happy about that, to be honest with you. I do have one 401k, but it's not the end-all be-all for me. That's me personally. But I would make sure, if I were you, I would shift as much of my assets to cash as possible, as quickly as possible, because last week we saw the collapse of Washington Mutual and then Wachovia as well, which was just bought by Citi. Hopefully it's not your bank. I'm headed to my bank after this is done, but I have our corporate dollars in a small community bank and my personal dollars as well. And that bank has been very, very prudent and very, very good at handling its finances. I'm happy to be there. But what about bigger banks like yours? What's going to happen with the branches of Bank of America? Is Bank of America too big to fail? I hope so. I'd check on my cash if I were you. Well, now the question is, what subject can we turn to that is less depressing than the one I just talked about? Well, let's take a look at what's going on in sports in our remaining 5 minutes or so. If you look at Technorati Sports, we have blog poll, the 2008 college football rankings, week 5. That's the rising blog post by attention and the rising news stories by attention. Oklahoma number 1, Alabama number 2 in the AP poll. But the question is, before we take a look at those news stories, what's also happening? Those are rising stories. What's happening in the National Football League? Linehan out as head coach of the Rams after 0-4 start. The winless St. Louis Rams fired Scott Linehan on Monday, the morning after a 4th straight lopsided loss to start the season. Defensive coordinator Jim Haslett wants the coach of the New Orleans Saints will replace Linehan on an interim basis. The Rams made the decision in the middle of the night and made it public several hours later. Let's think about what that means. Well, first of all, it not only means that Scott Linehan was out as head coach of the Rams today, it means that for him on this day, between the bailout failure to pass in the House and his own job, he's had a terrible day. Oh, my goodness. But it also means that Oakland Raiders head coach Lane Kiffin lives to coach on at least for one more day. Let's take a look at what people over at RaiderFans.net are saying about that real quick. RaiderFans.net is the largest forum devoted to Oakland Raider news. I'm a member, as well as I believe 10,000 other people. Scrolling down, we find some interesting comments. For example, this one, time and patience is critical, where this poster is basically saying that that the team has been pathetic for the better part of 5 years, and that patience is necessary to cause and allow the rebuilding program to work. Here's my take on the Raiders situation. I was not a fan of the Raiders hiring Lane Kiffin, but when he brought in a seasoned offensive coordinator and Bill Walsh indirect disciple Greg Knapp to run the offense and maintain Rex Ryan for the defense, I became more comfortable with Lane Kiffin. I felt that the Raiders needed to go back and hire someone like a Mike Tomlin. I'll be absolutely honest with you. Al Davis has a tendency to hire people that he believes he can control. Yes, he did bring in the first African-American coach in Art Shell and then brought him back. But that's because Art was loyal to Al Davis. The only person that Al Davis ever brought in that challenged him was arguably the person who was outside of John Madden, who also challenged him the most successful. And that was Chucky. That's right. John Gruden, who's currently the coach of the Tampa Bay Bucks, who I had the pleasure of meeting at Lee Steinberg's Super Bowl party in Houston in 2004. John is a masterful schemer and football tactician, very confident, and the kind of template for the coach that the Raiders need to hire. I don't know if Mr. Davis thought that perhaps he was getting that in Lane Kiffin. Perhaps he did. But the bottom line is that the offense under Kiffin, and I might add with the assistance of Greg Knapp, who is the offensive coordinator, is nowhere near as effective as it could be. They need to take the ball and put it in the hands of Jamarcus Russell and develop a top flight passing game to not only allow them to score points, but to get them out of trouble when they're behind. In closing, turning back to college football, check out Corn Nation. That's cornnation.com. Great blog on college football. SC in his poll dropped from number 1 to number 16. But he has Cal. My Cal Bears ranked 24th, and they're climbing. Come back again to our next blog report.